The Indianapolis Colts are in one of the more interesting situations heading into the 2025 NFL season. So in today's video, we're going to talk about why I personally still believe in the Indianapolis Colts and maybe more specifically, Anthony Richardson. Subscribe if you're new, let's hop into it. So the way the video is going to work is we are going to begin by talking about what happened last year, then we'll talk about some of the moves they've made so far this offseason, and then we'll end the video off with what I think this team will look like in 2025. As I mentioned, we are going to begin by talking about just some general statistics and give some context to these numbers. They rank 16th in points per game, 13th in yards per game, 16th in touchdowns per game. They were pretty below average on third down conversion rate, and they were pretty poor in the red zone. They ran the ball effectively, with most of their statistics in the rushing category being top 10. However, in the passing department, they were not very good. They ranked dead last in completion percentage, second to last in interception thrown rate, and just in general did not throw the ball a crap ton. We all kind of know why. Anthony really struggled last year. And then defensively speaking, they are not statistically great, but I think there is some context that does need to be added involved with this, because they ranked 24th in opponents' points per game, 29th in opponents' yards per game, and 24th as well in opponents' touchdowns per game. They were also very bad on third down and not very good in the red zone. When it comes to running the football, opponents like to run the ball a little bit more. Opponent rush play percentage was 47.75%, where they averaged 131.8 yards per game. And opponents only ran pass plays on 52.25% of snaps. Again, that's on average, where opponents had moderate success, having 229.4 yards per game. Now, I do think it's important that we add some context to these numbers. We'll begin with the defensive side of things, where I felt like this defense has the talent necessary, especially last year, where I thought they had a really talented unit, but they really did not perform up to expectations so far this offseason, which we'll talk about here in a moment. They've added some nice pieces to the secondary and even added some pieces on the defensive line, and I do think this defense should take a nice step forward. Last year, this was arguably a bottom 10 defense, or maybe bottom 15, somewhere along those lines. I do expect this defense to be significantly better. I don't think it'll be a top 10 defense, but if you tell me they're somewhere along the lines of like 11 to 19 or somewhere in between that, I definitely do think the Colts will take that. One thing this Colts team really struggles with is just big chunk plays. They gave up a lot of big chunk plays. They also were not very good against the run, so I do expect all those things to improve next year, because I do think it's a very talented unit. And then offensively speaking, we all kind of know what this team needs to improve upon, and that's obviously the quarterback position. Anthony Richardson really struggled last year, and I do think it's kind of a make or break year for him. He just struggles in a lot of different categories that you have to succeed at if you want to be a high level quarterback. Reading the defense, managing the pocket, not throwing interceptions, just taking sometimes the easy checkdowns, taking things that are open instead of constantly trying to make the big play. We all know that Anthony can make just some ridiculous throws. I mean, it feels like every other week he makes just a disgusting throw that no other quarterback can make, and then he'll follow it up with a game where he has multiple interceptions or just multiple bad plays. I mean, again, this team ranks dead last in completion percentage, and I want to say Anthony had like a less than 50% completion percentage from last year, which is just not good enough. If this Colts offense wants to improve from what they were last year, they have to throw the ball better. Again, this is a really solid rushing football team with Anthony, who can run the football, Jonathan Taylor, and all those guys, but you have to at least have a respectable passing game. Like, this unit cannot be a bottom 5 passing unit. It has way too much talent with too many good receivers. Now you add in a stud tight end, which we'll talk about in a moment. Like, this team just significantly has to improve from where they were last year. But with that said, let's go ahead and briefly cover what they did this offseason, where they signed Cam Bynum, Charvarius Ward, Daniel Jones, and a handful of other players. Again, as I talked about a bit earlier, I do expect this defense and just this team in general to be significantly improved from where they were last year. Cameron Bynum is a really solid safety that is a turnover machine. This was a unit last year in Indianapolis that struggled to create some turnovers. I do think Cameron Bynum instantly steps in there, will be your starting free safety, will be a big time improvement from what you had last year. And I think he's going to be a big time playmaker, just getting turnovers, forcing interceptions, forcing tight window throws. And it's going to allow Indianapolis to be a defense that can get off the field a lot easier. This is a team last year that, quite frankly, was, like I said, struggling to force turnovers. It was a unit that relied heavily on getting off the field on third down and getting off the field on fourth down, which they were not capable of doing so at a good enough level. Now you bring in a Cameron Bynum, and now you have that extra element of just forcing some turnovers. Charvarius Ward had a bit of a down year last year, but we all kind of understand the circumstances surrounding that. Now he enters into a situation here with Indianapolis where he's likely to be the starter. I think it's a nice new fresh slate for him. There's some talented pieces around him with some good safeties, some other good corners around him. I do think Charvarius Ward should be in for a bit of a bounce back year, even if he's not like that super dominant cornerback one. 1. As long as he is a good enough player, I do think this secondary will take a nice step forward. They also did bring in Daniel Jones to kind of bring in a little bit of some competition in that quarterback room. I have heard, and again, we don't know if we can confirm this. Obviously, we haven't really seen the pads on. We'll obviously get to that in the preseason, but I have heard that Daniel Jones has looked quite good in this system, and I kind of expect it because I think he's a pretty solid fit within this system, the Shane Steichen system, that being it. I still believe that Anthony will be the quarterback come week 1. Like, even if he does struggle in the preseason, I do not expect the Indianapolis Colts to just give up on him. So unless Anthony just absolutely struggles this offseason, like just completely puts together a disaster class, then maybe Daniel Jones gets in there. But I do expect Daniel Jones to be the backup. But I think the good news for Indianapolis fans is that if Anthony mid-season either gets injured or is just really struggling, you can throw a Daniel Jones in there. And while I didn't think he was that impressive for New York, I do think he'll be a little bit better with this Indianapolis Colts team. And that's just because I think he's a better fit within the system. I think he is a smart quarterback that will understand Shane's system. Whereas for Brian Daboll, they're asking the quarterback to do a little bit more. I do think Shane Steichen can kind of simplify the offense to Daniel Jones if he ends up being a quarterback for this team at some points. But again, I do expect Anthony to ultimately be the starter. But that was really it for their offseason in terms of like in the free agency market. But I thought they had a pretty successful draft. So let's hop into that. So in the NFL draft, they took Tyler Warren with the first round pick. They then took JT Tuimoloau, Justin Wally, Jalen Travis, DJ Giddens, down the board here, Riley Leonard, Tim Smith, and Hunter Wohler. We'll go at this pick by pick. Let's start off with the Tyler Warren one. This to me was one of the best picks of the first round. Just simply put, because it was the right pick and it was the perfect fitting here as well. This is a Colts team that for the longest time has just not really had very good tight end play. And I think that in some ways has hurt the success of Anthony Richardson. For me, and this is just my opinion, if I am a quarterback, you have really 3 best friends, or maybe 4 best friends. The number 1 best friend you're always going to have is your offensive line. If you have a good offensive line, you're more likely to succeed. Then I think the number 2 one is having a really good tight end or slot receiver, because typically those are your underneath stuff. Those are your easy check down reads. Then your third is probably going to be your running back, and then your fourth is a dominant outside receiver. This is a Colts team that just has not had that tight end factor. Yes, they've had Josh Downs, who can play a bit in the slot, and he has kind of been a bit of a safety blanket at times for Anthony. But Tyler Warren will truly become that safety blanket option that this team has just really needed. They have a good offensive line. They have a couple good receivers on the outside. They have a Joshua Downs. They have Jonathan Taylor. But they have been missing that tight end position that can just become the safety blanket for this team. And Tyler Warren is a really fun safety blanket at that. I think for this team, I don't expect him to be a 1,000-yard tight end. Like, I don't expect him to come in there and be a Gronk or a Kelsey or a Brock Bowers or anything like that. But that's not really what this Colts team needs. They really just need somebody that can get like 700 to 1,000 yards a season, can be a reliable blocker, can just catch everything, can be a versatile piece, and that's kind of what Tyler Warren is. You can use him in all different type of packages. He can play quarterback, he can play running back, you can use him as a receiver. He finds ways to get open. He's very sure-handed, he's smart, physical, strong. He made some catches for Penn State that were just ridiculous. So in a situation where Anthony has, a rusher right in his face, he can kind of just throw that ball to Tyler Warren and see if he can make a play. I just felt like it was the perfect fit. It was one of those things where none of us saw Tyler Warren falling to pick 14. It felt very unlikely, and then it ended up happening. And for the Indianapolis Colts, I think Tyler Warren's going to be a really fun player that's going to be an impactful starter like immediately. Then in round 2, you took JT Tuimoloau. I thought JT was an underrated player in this draft, not because I think he's a super high upside player, but quite honestly the opposite. I think his floor is extremely safe. Like, I truly do believe that JT is going to be a good player. Now, I don't know if he's ever going to be a dominant player. I don't know if he'll ever become a 10 sack a season like guy, but what I do know is JT's instantly going to step in there, be a rotational edge rusher that's solid against the run, can get to the quarterback. He's big, long, lengthy. Wouldn't say he's the greatest athlete or the twitchiest guy with the greatest bend, but he's a strong guy. He can definitely do some bull rush moves. He can probably get a couple sacks a season. But more than anything, he's really going to help this edge rushing room when it comes to stuffing the run. Again, last year, the Colts were okay to sometimes a little bit below average against certain matchups against the run. JT will definitely help that. In round 3, they kind of took a bit of a questionable pick with Justin Wally. Admittedly speaking, a lot of people, including myself, did not have a day 2 grade on him. I had a kind of a mid to late day 3 grade. but he's an experienced guy that I still think has a level of growth that can definitely happen. I do think because he is a slider frame guy, you might want to consider him more as a nickel, more so than like an outside corner. But he is a fairly solid athlete that can make some plays. He was, for the most part, sticky in coverage. I thought as the route developed, the deeper the play went, it kind of felt like Justin kind of got lost at times, which I think would benefit him if he were to play more in a nickel role. It just kind of feels like with his size, with his skill set, with his speed and athleticism, and because he's a willing enough tackler, I think he might be best suited off as like a nickel alongside Kenny Moore, maybe the long-term Kenny Moore replacements. In round 4, again, kind of a bit of a reachy pick here with Jalen Travis. I don't know if Jalen will ever become a full-time starting tackle. He is a big dude though, like 6'8", 330 plus pounds. Not the greatest athlete, doesn't have the greatest bend, but he's one of those dudes where he can stay in front of you just because of how massive he is. And with his long arms, with his big hands, if he does get his hands on you, very often he's going to win that rep. It just kind of happens to be that I just don't see him ever being a full-time starter with just how limited of an athlete he is. But if you tell me that he will be a temporary, swing tackle that gets a couple reps a game where, maybe your tackle goes out for a game or two and Jalen Travis steps in there, I do think he's good enough to get that job done. Round 5, they took DJ Giddens. I thought this was a really nice value. I don't know what role he's going to have on this team like in 2025 because they already have Jonathan Taylor and they also have Khalil Herbert. But as that like running back 3, maybe your long-term plan at running back 2, DJ Giddens is a fine player. Like he is a shifty guy, very twitchy, a little bit smaller, but definitely is somebody who can step in there, be a good athlete, make some big spark plays. I think he's going to be probably utilized more as a receiving back this upcoming season, and I think he'll have to develop that. But I do believe as time does go on, he could end up being like your long-term answer at like your running back 2 spot. Also, to get him in round 5, I thought was pretty solid value. Then there's the Riley Leonard pick, and admittedly speaking, I'm not the highest on Riley Leonard, but I do think his fit within Shane Steichen's system, if we assume Shane is going to be the long-term answer at quarterback or at head coach, then I think Riley Leonard actually could end up being a really solid fit. Again, I don't think that Riley Leonard will ever become like a full-time starting quarterback or end up being the Anthony Richardson replacement, but I think his skill set in a lot of ways reminds me of Daniel Jones, which ironically is going to be his teammates. But he's a solid athlete. He can move the chains. I think on 4th and 1, obviously you're going to have Anthony out there, so you don't need Riley Leonard to do that. But like on a tush-push situation, I could see Riley Leonard entering the game and genuinely being the guy just because he's a bit stockier. And honestly, I just trust him to stay healthy more so than Anthony. But again, he's kind of a developmental piece that has a lot of stuff he has to work on. I don't think he's a finished product by no means, even though he's a little bit of an older prospect compared to some of the younger quarterbacks like Quinn Ewers. But I do believe that Riley Leonard will be their long-term backup quarterback. I think he's a solid system fit. So we'll have to wait and see if he can ultimately make an impact. And then they're round 6 picking Tim Smith and Hunter Wohler. I'm not going to kid you guys. Don't know too much about them. So if you guys do, let me know in the comment section below. But as I mentioned in the introduction to this video, I think this team is pretty good. And I think that we need to stop sleeping on this team. And I still kind of believe in this roster. I know it feels like the consensus that everyone's kind of out on Indianapolis. And I think the reason why is because a lot of people are out on Anthony. But I'm just going to kind of stick to my guns here. And I have been sticking to this point ever since he got drafted at Indianapolis. I think he is a fantastic fit within the system. If you guys don't know, Shane Steichen was the offensive coordinator back, I think in 2022, I want to say, or maybe it was 23. I think it was 22 though, with the Philadelphia Eagles when they made that Super Bowl run where they lost initially to the Kansas City Chiefs. He was the offensive coordinator for Jalen Hurts. And I thought, man, if Anthony can just develop nicely, he could end up becoming Jalen Hurts-like, just because in a lot of ways they're similar. I mean, they came out of college as these big, bulkier quarterbacks with strong arms that were athletic freaks, but were very raw as passers. And we know Jalen Hurts developed quite nicely, but we haven't quite seen that from Anthony. And I think in some ways we have seen a lot from Anthony, but I also just think in some ways, like, look, guys, he's played 15 games. And obviously there's a trend now with him being injury prone, and that's a very legitimate issue. But I also think that we just have to give him some time, whether it's a full 2025 season or hell, maybe even a 2026 season. I do think in some ways, like, we have to give him a bit more time. We all knew coming out of the draft that Anthony was going to be a developmental quarterback. Like, he had to develop, like he was not a finished product. And he started in year 1, got injured almost immediately, missed the entire season, came back last year, looked very different, did not look as clean, did not look as good, had a couple of injuries throughout the year, And I kind of think this year is a bit of a make or break year. Not necessarily because I don't think he might not ever get a different chance at a different team or with this same team. It's just that he has to take a step forward. And I don't think this Colts team needs Anthony to be a Pro Bowl level quarterback. I just think they need Anthony to be better, to be an improved version of himself, to get to 60% completion percentage, to throw more touchdowns than interceptions, to just have a bit more of a complete game on his resume. And I also think more than anything, they just need him to stay healthy, which in some ways is kind of an unfair thing to ask of Anthony because he kind of can't control it, but he just has to. Like, they cannot have this carousel at the quarterback position where they're getting inconsistent play from Anthony when he's healthy while also having injury issues like every other week. You need Anthony to stay healthy. You need Anthony to be the guy. And I think the nice thing for Indianapolis is, look, if Anthony can't stay healthy, if he cannot develop to become the guy, well, you have a Riley Leonard. You now have a Daniel Jones. And I think either one of those guys who are both young quarterbacks could take the reins for the rest of the year if Anthony just really struggles this upcoming season with either injuries or just performance. And although it would suck that you wasted a top 5 pick on Anthony when you look back in it in retrospect, I mean, at the end of the day, his contract is only for 2 more years. So worst case scenario, you just take a quarterback next year that ends up becoming the guy. I'm not willing to give up on Anthony though. I really did believe in him coming out of college just because, man, if he can just develop, he has everything in the toolbox to be an awesome starting quarterback. Again, freak athlete, insane size, can move around the pocket quite nicely, but needs to learn the little nuances to pocket management. He can make every throw on the football field, just not consistently, but he can make every throw. Like, he's made throws off his back foot 80 yards downfield, and it's just disgusting. But you need that consistency from every aspect of his game, from his accuracy to his decision making, to his injuries, to just being on the field, to being a leader, to managing the pocket. All those things they need Anthony to be more consistent on. And I still think we have not seen enough from him quite yet. I mean, it's only been a 15-game sample size. But when you look at the rest of the roster around him, it's very talented. There's a lot of good players on this team. Jonathan Taylor is one of the best running backs out there. They have some depth in that position too. You now have a solid offensive line, though you did lose 2 interior offensive linemen, which might suck. But I do think they have some temporary replacements that you have some faith in. Like, you have Tanner, you have Matt. I generally believe in both those guys, but we'll have to wait and see. They kind of have a limited playing time for both those pieces. But outside of that, you have Raymond, who's one of the more underrated tackle prospects. Quentin Nelson's, obviously a staple at that left guard spot. And then Braden Smith has also become a staple there as well. Your tight end, Tyler Warren. You also have Mo Alley Cox. I think they have some really talented receivers that can give you some big time juice. Michael Pittman Jr. I still believe in Adonai Mitchell. I thought there was plenty on the bone last year, and I think he should have a bigger year next year. Alec Pierce and Josh Downs, that's a really nice 4 set of receivers that I think is talented. They got size. They can do a bunch of different things. And again, if Adonai Mitchell can just get some more opportunities and really work with Anthony, that can be a nice duo. And then defensively speaking, it's going to be a better unit from what it was last year. I think all of their starters are pretty solid. Kwity Paye or JT, whoever gets that spot. Grover Stewart, DeForest Buckner, Samson Ebukam, or Laiatu Latu, whatever works out there. Jalen Carley, Zaire Franklin, those are some solid linebackers. Jalen Jones, Nick Cross, Cameron Bynum, Charvarius Ward, Kenny Moore. And now you have some depth options too with Corey Ballantyne, your 3rd round rookie, Justin Wally, Juju Brents, who I know not a lot of Colts fans love to see, but Juju's also there. So there is a team here that has a lot of talent, some good players, but again, I got to get back to it. It all comes back on the shoulders of Anthony Richardson. Sadly, it's a situation where it's a make or break year for him. He has to put it on the field. And again, they don't need him to be a top 10 quarterback, but if they can get top 15 performances from Anthony Richardson consistently this year, they're going to win a lot of games. And I'm going to leave you guys with this one. I think the AFC South is actually a little bit more open than people think. Right now, it's obviously Houston's division. It's been Houston's division for the past, 2 years now. But I think Indianapolis, when you look at it, talent for talent, is just as talented as Houston. I will say Houston is more talented defensively, but I look at this Indianapolis Colts offense, and I would say it's pretty fair of me to say that there is more talent outside of that quarterback room on Indianapolis than there is in Houston. I will take Indianapolis's offensive line. I'll take their tight end. I'll take maybe their receiving core, depending on what, their rookies look like. And I'll take Jonathan Taylor. So Indianapolis is just a very talented offense that can compete with any of these teams. Tennessee is probably a year or 2 away from being a serious contender, and Jacksonville will be better next year, but I still think Indianapolis is probably a more talented team than them. So if you're Indianapolis, the division is wide open. There should not be this consensus out there that Houston is just going to run away with this division. I think Indianapolis will be right there with them. Now, I'll say this, again, my final little statement here. I do think Indianapolis has to win the division if they want to make the playoffs, just because I think the AFC is going to be pretty loaded this year with a lot of good teams, and it's going to be difficult to make the wild card, especially if you're not like a 12-win team. But I think if Indianapolis can find a way to win this division, which they were so close to doing just 2 years ago, then I think Indianapolis will be in the playoffs, and they're going to be a tough out for any team if Anthony Richardson is good next year. But you guys let me know in the comment section below. Let me know a couple of things. Number one, what do you expect from Anthony Richardson? And number two, how many wins will the Indianapolis Colts win in 2025? Let me know. And if you enjoyed, hit the like and subscribe button. Love you all. Peace.